Let me move to asking you about Steve Bannon because he's become he's been such an influence on Donald Trump, and I want to know how and why. You said that you yourself are Jewish. You said you're the grandson of Auschwitz survivors. Have you ever been concerned by some of the dialogue and some of the things that Steve Bannon has said, some of the undertones that can definitely be construed as anti-Semitic, and then there's some of the whispers about things that he has said behind the scenes that are absolutely anti-Semitic. Does that concern you at all? And have you ever brought that up to him?
I've never heard any. If you can point to something specific, I would answer it. I could tell you that he was the strongest proponent immediately of moving the embassy in
well, that's
Israel.
Because somebody would say it's because he hates the Muslims more than he hates the Jews.
Look, I think that I think that this is a caricature that people make of him. I could tell you that we have lots of. He's worked with a lot of Jewish people. I don't find it. He's never said anything He's never said anything racist to me, and he doesn't condone it. So I think that that's something where. Look, here's the thing about Steve. Steve is a revolutionary type person, and he's separate, and he not only makes people on the left anxious, he makes people on the right because he wants to end the hierarchy or resettle the establishment. Remember, there's a two-party duopoly that I think the president is basically fighting on the Republican side now, but you're going to see on the Democrat side, you kind of see it in between with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and even, let's say, an Elizabeth Warren, or somehow, they don't agree on every issue. Point being, going back to Steve, is that he doesn't have a lot of friends on the right. And
well, somebody would say Steve doesn't have a lot of friends anymore right now. Okay.
That's not true.
How did he go ahead.
You want to come back on, and you have anything to point to? I'd be happy to
that's
talk
fine,
to you
and I
about it.
appreciate you coming on. How did Steve Bannon become such an influence on Donald Trump? I mean, one episode that I find interesting is how he was able to get in on the National Security Council. I know he only was on for one a meeting, but I think it was unprecedented for someone in his position on the staff to be attending National Security Council meetings. How did that happen? What is it that he did to convince Donald Trump to allow him? I mean, does Donald Trump have a good grasp of how the presidency works? And because of his lack of understanding of how the system works, was he able to kind of manipulate the situation to get him inserted into situations that otherwise he might not have been?
It's funny when you hear these questions from people, and I feel the same way. When I always think about this now when I get questions like this, and I'm not criticizing you, and I think about when I ask somebody something about an outside situation. Here's what I know about Steve. When I worked for Trump from 2011 to mid-2015, there were two people that would take my phone call come 2013 that actually took the idea of Trump running for president seriously. That was Steve Bannon of then Breitbart and Chris Ruddy of Newsmax. Steve, there was just a lot of natural synergy in terms of the platform that the president, then Mr. Trump, was going to take on his campaign: trade, legal immigration, law enforcement, etc., and Breitbart and conservative talk radio, mind you. That was just natural. Steve entered that campaign, you have to remember, Hillary Clinton was up by 16 points. They didn't necessarily even expect to win. I think Steve always in the back of his mind knew that they were going to win. They went back on this message that he went on. But when you got to the White House, I haven't discussed with him this issue you're talking about. But with that said, I can only assume that the president was well aware that he was on the National Security Council. And but there had been other advisors, sir, in past administrations, and you can fact check me on this. But I believe even like a David Axelrod was on that council before, so this wasn't so abnormal. If I'm wrong,
one of the interesting things that I read was that he was put on the council to counterbalance Michael Flynn, because Michael Flynn had misled the vice president about his meeting with the Russians. But is that normal for within? And we all know that, the Trump administration, there's infighting. I mean, more people have there's been a revolving door. Let's be honest. Is that? What was the feeling within the administration? What was the feeling with Steve that people within that staff had to be pitted against each other and checked against each other? That didn't happen in the Obama administration.
Here's what I would say is Steve's approach, which is the president's approach that he's taking now on national security, one, economics and national security are interrelated. In other words, they want to call it a trade war, but what he's doing to refocus the economy and reset the economic order of the world, with we doing these trade deals, that's interrelated to national security. And I think that what Steve wanted to do was, if you get people with the old approaches, whether they're Republican hawks or hawks of the Pentagon, etc., like a Jim Mattis, they were really had their eyes set on China the whole time, and that wasn't something necessarily that maybe even Flynn. Once again, this is me. I haven't just got this. I'm not quoting Steve per se. I'm just thinking, but this isn't something that maybe even Flynn was on board with per se. And you have to also remember is that Steve is a non-interventionalist when it comes to he's less interventionist than I am when it comes to engagement.
But as far as inter-staff, like I mean, would you communicate with Steve a lot while he was the White House chief strategist? Was there did he kind of give you some insight into how people were treating him within the staff? Was he kind of ostracized from the rest of the staff from the get-go? Is what I'm asking.
No, I don't think so. What I think happened was that when you had this investigation and this special counsel, after the Comey firing, that really upset the West Wing in terms of turnover. That's where you see where a lot of quickly a month after or so when Mueller was appointed, only another couple months, these Reince Priebus and Steve were gone. I think that Steve would tell you, Steve doesn't like having bosses. Steve had always joked around going in, I'm either going to be in for 8 months or 8 years. And I could tell you the day after he left, so it was announced on a Friday, I called him that Saturday, he never sounded happier. Then the
Is he going to hang out with Omarosa? Are they going to go out to dinner and maybe have a conversation? Did they get along?
No, have you read the Omarosa
No, I haven't.
book?
I haven't yet.
Have you looked? Oh, you have? She does not have one negative thing to say
about Steve Bannon.
We were.
How is the relationship between Donald Trump and Steve Bannon now? Because Donald Trump called him Sloppy Steve after Steve Bannon had a lot of nice things to say about Ivanka Trump being dumb as a brick, supposedly, and he had a lot of things to say about Jared Kushner's money laundering. He even used the word treasonous, supposedly. Again, I'm not when it came to Jared Kushner's. So how is the relationship between Donald Trump and Steve Bannon today?
Well, I never ask him directly because I don't want to be accused of leaking if he still talks to the president, but he's in touch with a lot of people daily in the White House, and a lot of outside advisors to the president, whether it's like a Sean Hannity or some of the legal team, the Sekulow or Giuliani. I was surprised he did this interview on MSNBC. He said he had spoken to the president a couple months ago. That was news to me. I think that they talk. With that said, look, the president attacked me on Twitter in April. That's the president.
Did you think, was that like a landmark moment in your life when Donald Trump tweeted about you?
A drug addict loser. Called me a drunk drug addict. Well, I was kind of upset because he didn't use my Twitter handle, so I didn't get followers like that. He probably did that on purpose, too. He probably didn't reference me to make sure I didn't gain the followers. You could say something negative about Donald Trump. He'll say something negative about you, and you guys can be best friends like a couple days later.
So are they talking now, though? Do they talk? Does Donald
what?
Trump and Steve Bannon communicate in the present time?
I thought what I do know is the last time Steve has answered this publicly. Once again, I don't ask him because I don't want to be accused of leaking this. Okay. He did say on Friday on MSNBC, he spoke to him a couple months ago. That was news to me, but I was glad to hear it. And I'm sure they'll be in communication as it gets closer to the election is the answer I would give. I don't know, but I couldn't tell you the last time they spoke. And if they spoke yesterday,
I just want to ask you one last thing, rehashing something that I brought up about like the people of color, Latino, voters, and how they feel about some of Steve Bannon's messaging. Does Steve Bannon understand why some of his messaging is perceived as racist by people of color in this country?
I think that I've talked to Steve about this issue, and the one thing Steve doesn't understand is why it's perceived. He thinks he's helped. See, here's what we think. We don't understand. We think our policies. We think a secure border. We think law and order. We think that a strong economy. We think that making sure that all Americans are able to have, the opportunity to find a job, that's a colorblind policy. So I think when it says that people say to us, well, you're anti-Latino, first of all, I know we didn't get I know it's still a low amount, but the president who ran very hard against illegal immigration got a higher amount of the Hispanic vote nationally than Romney did, okay? We think that that's because of the economy and things like that. Long story short is we don't understand. We don't understand. But the message I do want to give your audience once again is we don't embrace these racists on our side.
But they embrace you guys, though.
We don't want their votes.
But you wouldn't win. Sam, let me just stop. I don't think that you remember the president didn't win the popular vote. Okay, so for him, and he got pretty much as many white guys as he possibly can, and he got the majority, 51% of white women. I think that for him to win again, he's going to have to win the popular vote. So he's going to have to appeal to communities that feel ostracized by him, that feel attacked by him, and a lot of them trace some of the anti-Latino messaging to.
But here's the thing about it. When you say, here's the one thing I'll tell you: this president is the one who's willing to do an immigration deal with the Democrats. It's from his point of view, it's the Democrats who don't want that.
I kind of agree with you there. They don't want the issue settled because they want to run on it. So I mean, you have a point on that one.
We feel that's exactly right. We feel as if they're not interested in a real deal. We feel that when we come to them and we say, look, we're willing, if you say it's 12 million, we can work with this as long as we get border security, we end these policies so that they don't happen. We don't have another 12 million. You understand what I'm saying specifically? They never want these deals done because we feel that it's in their interest. And what I want to say is this is the president who has moved the party to that side. He's moved to the party to say that we're willing to make that deal. He doesn't have the Democrats, and he can't get enough votes.
I mean, I tell my Latino friends, because my concern is the DACA kids, who I believe have every reason to be in this country. They grew up in this country. They're in schools. If they're not in jail, there's no reason for them to. Even if they're in jail, to be honest with you, they grew up here. I've told my friends, maybe we should just go ahead and start building the wall. And as soon as a Democrat gets elected, because we know at some point, then we tear it down. You know what I'm saying? So we tear it down, and it'd be a big symbolic thing. I will say this. Go ahead.
The president took the Republican Party to that side. And you'll hear on conservative far-right radio that never wanted that DACA deal with George W. Bush or Mitt Romney even, if he was running on DACA. If he said, look, I'll settle it if I'm elected president, he would have to say, no, no, no. We accept that deal, but we can't get border funding in certain other, parts of the deal that the Democrats want. And we feel it, once again, as if it's the Democrats that don't want to do the deal.
But then when the Democrats are in power and they want to do a deal, it's the Republicans that drag their feet. Look, you said something about the duality in the two parties. I'm a registered independent. I'm a liberal. I've never voted Republican in my life. But I'm open to independent views and trying to find the balance in the middle. So I just feel that, man, this political game of the opposition dragging their feet because they want to run on it is a problem. I don't know how to get around it. And I don't know that the Republicans are going to really, put up any platform that's going to bridge the gap. So,
Look, when Trump came into office, he wanted to do, Steve Bannon told him you should pass infrastructure first.
Has he,
infrastructure?
Though?
What?
Has he passed infrastructure?
No. What? Yeah. No, so let me finish. He listened to Paul Ryan and Reince Priebus, former GOP chairman, right, who became his chief of staff. They went after Obamacare first, right? They went after to repeal Obamacare, and that stopped the progress of getting anything done. And then they were only able to pass this tax cut. With that said, the tax cut, I think, has helped the economy in terms of job growth. But that goes against the two-party duopoly where the president he started with infrastructure. I think a lot of things.
Last couple things. Now I just want to get to your story. I found, I want to relate to you because you admitted that, that Trump called you a drug-addicted loser on Twitter because you had that moment. I believe it was on MSNBC where the host accused you of being drunk and stuff. Look, I'll relate to you on this. I walk into work every day smelling like marijuana, and everyone's always accusing me of being high. But they're not wrong. So did you actually have, it was a hard time you were going through. Did you knock a couple back before doing the interview?
No, what happened was, so you're talking about that famous day. So that was a Monday. The Sunday, what happened was I got the subpoena on a Friday. Sunday, I went out with a friend of mine. We definitely partied.
You're admitting it. Good.
I did, but I did not drink that. What I'm telling you is,
and the next day after getting really drunk is always when you smell the. You know what I'm saying? Because that alcohol smell leaves your pores the next morning for sure.
That's what I did, and especially it was at the end of the day. And I think that after that whole day, I was definitely coming out of my pores. Probably that's what I did. So what I'm telling you is, I didn't drink during that day, but I definitely drank too much.
Sam, thank you for being honest. Thank you for being on the show, man. It's coming on and speaking to Latinos. I don't know that our audience is necessarily convinced, but it's good for them to hear what is actually being said on the other side. And the last thing I'll say is, if you're ever in LA, come by, and then we'll have an even more contentious face-to-face interview.
I didn't think this was contentious. We agree to disagree on some
Awesome.
issues.
And if Steve Bannon ever says anything anti-Semitic, you got to call him out on it, man. He probably waits for you to leave the room.
I don't really don't
Thanks
think
for being,
so.
man. Thanks for being on the show.